All right, so if you're watching the replay, you are here tuning in today for the VeraData webinar, Breaking Free from Tradition, How to Modernize Nonprofit Growth. We have the co-founders, Matt Kaiser and Michael Peterman of VeraData, and we have Justin Wheeler from Funraise on the line. So we're going to get straight into it. We've got a ton to talk about today. So first of all, let's just kick off the conversation with, we're going to cover old school traditions and the ways we've been looking at data and fundraising and how AI and machine learning and tech is kind of revolutionizing that process. So let's start with our guest, Justin. What are some of the traditional, those deeply ingrained donor growth strategies that are still present but have now kind of become obsolete? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a great way to start the conversation. Also, could be a controversial way to start the conversation, depending on where everyone is at in their own sort of fundraising programs. But maybe as I answer the question, I'll also provide a bit of context of where I'm coming from. As Diana mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Funraise, which is a technology platform that's raised over $1 billion for nonprofit organizations. Prior to that, I spent 12 years in the nonprofit sector, started 2 nonprofit organizations, and had scaled those organizations in the tens of millions. And so have experience as a practitioner in the nonprofit space, and then on the tech side, building for nonprofit organizations. And I think that the trends that I see that are losing steam in the nonprofit space are ones that are not being approached from a multi-channel approach. And what I mean by that is, if you are just doing direct mail, if you are just raising funds digitally online, and there's not a cohesive strategy to bring those two things together, you're leaving a lot of money on the table, or you're eliminating a donor base from one of those channels if there's not cohesiveness within the channel. And so I think that as you think about your overall fundraising programs, it's taking a step back, and it's not answering the question of like, should we be in all channels? Because not every organization belongs in every single channel. I think the question should be, the channels that we do focus on and where we do have strength, how do we bring cohesion so that they can complement each other? And that's generally the approach I like to take when looking at overall fundraising channels and their effectiveness.
I love that. And that is something absolutely ingrained, in what we like to practice over here too, is honing in and focusing on the direct mail piece, because that's still the powerhouse of fundraising, but broadening our reach and making that cohesive. You said that perfectly, like this cohesive strategy between that message and getting online digitally. So then let's keep on that note. Michael, what do you think?
So I agree with Justin. I think lack of true channel integration is a big gap, but I also think there's a lot of things that fall into this category. Nonprofit fundraising is still a very traditional sector in a lot of ways. So beyond the channel, anything from list or audience planning, package testing, various dimensions of attribution, a lot of data sitting in silos across departments within the charities. I mean, practically, I think everything remains to some degree in most every charity doing direct-to-consumer fundraising. And it's like Newton's law. An object at rest stays at rest unless it's acted upon by some outside force. Bad habits in fundraising, traditional habits, it's the same thing. And we're that outside force. You don't know what you don't know until someone illuminates that for you. So I think, like many areas of the world, AI is advancing our ability to metabolize far more information, far more volumes of data, so much faster, help us learn faster, gain deeper insights into any number of things. And the traditional methods really do, from a number of standpoints, prevent the adoption of that technology. So there's a lot of things.
There is a lot of things. It's a very complex landscape that we're in right now. So Matt, what are your thoughts?
It's definitely an interesting time now. I think, as Michael mentioned, AI is definitely advancing our ability to metabolize vast amounts of data. But I'd say one of the traditional organizational strategies that I see rapidly shifting relates more to the organization's historical hesitancy or reluctance to invest in their infrastructure. And, in my world specifically, it's their data infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so while AI facilitates the ability to process all of that data, fundraisers, I think, are pretty quickly realizing that without that accurate, complete, comprehensive data set to input into all of these tools, that significant opportunity is kind of going unrealized. So I think the successful fundraisers are kind of waking up and starting to realize they need to invest in those people, tools, partners, even that can help develop that robust data infrastructure, that's really actionable.
Yeah, I like that, because that also takes the pressure a little bit off of them to have and contain everything in-house, as opposed to like reaching out to someone like your team who just already has the expertise in place and can facilitate. They understand, you got, like, your team understands the logistics of getting that in place, to make it a smoother transition and adoption of the technology that will be advancing their fundraising campaigns. So that's a good point. All right, I want to start over with my next question. I wanted to start with Michael this time. So moving into the newer, more modern strategies, what are some of the most productive ways that AI and machine learning are actually impacting like donor and fundraising growth?
So I think having the ability to see years and years, over a decade of standardized, granular data at one time in seconds, it means you can uncover never before seen trends in consumer preferences and how their changes in everyday spending impact their giving propensity. The cyclicality that spans years is not perceptible through any other means, right? A human can't look at data and know that. So understanding the ins and outs of capacity and propensity over time and formulaically interpreting years of behavior to expand that potential audience, to understand enough about the intersection of behaviors and solicitations to accelerate the relationship up the giving pyramid is something that I think AI is uniquely capable of doing. How to mathematically blend channels in ways that build more meaningful relationships. Just not possible through any traditional mechanism. You have to have the data, you have to have the capacity, you have to have all this history, and to be able to mathematically interpret everything in seconds, to move those donors up the pyramids, to begin with the end in mind, to think about interdepartmental alignment, all that stuff is right there in front of us with AI.
I love that you say, like, it's right in front of us. It's like right at this cusp, because we've been doing it, VeraData, we've been doing it for quite some time, but it's just gotten such a big boom, in the industry in the recent years, that I love that. It's just right there in front of us. Okay, so Matt, what are your thoughts on like the newer modern strategies that are kind of making their way into the nonprofit space right now?
Yeah, I think Michael hit it on the head, and what he said for me means it's about turning insights, into actions. Um, I think a lot of the conversation around AI relates to speed and the fact that now you can harness all this computational power to do something that either historically was next to impossible, or it would take the human or the kind of legacy technology a really long time to do whatever the thing might be. So I'd say that the speed AI enables for sure has impacted overall productivity, and the ability to kind of reduce cycle times, reduce processing times, reduce production timelines. In this space, a lot of that relates to kind of the time it takes to produce a piece of direct mail. I think the benefit AI offers to reduce those cycle times provides this kind of associated impact that the client is able to realize by delivering timely, relevant communications, is pretty game changing.
And a phrase I'm pretty sure I heard from you is on the back end of this too, the closing the loop on the back end of the optimization piece. Like the AI and machine learning algorithms really help us plan that campaign up front. But as the information's coming back, like it's still at work in the back end too, making more assessments, making more optimization adjustments, right?
For sure, all of these, the power in, we use AI and ML kind of interchangeably, and they are two different things. So I'd encourage the group to actually Google them, but underline the word learning in machine learning, right? And one of the benefits of this is that it's not a set it and forget it type of process or tool or solution. The more information and the continual nature of feeding the ecosystems this information leads to improved results. So you're exactly right. We kind of call it this learn to loop process, where we've deployed the solution, but it's super important to obviously get that result or disposition information so that continual improvements and refinements can be made. So yeah, I agree 100%.
Okay, and Justin, your thoughts on the new modern things that we're starting to see, emerge and take over in our space here.
Yeah, the way that I look at it is in a couple different buckets. And if I were to kind of differentiate, which I think is important to do, between machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think machine learning actually plays a really great role in more of a leading indicator type KPI. And what I mean by that is a lot of organizations historically have used data which has happened in the past, which is a lagging indicator of what's going to happen in the future. But it's a good way to kind of like create trends and understanding sort of like how things might happen. Whereas what we see with the application of machine learning is it actually has the ability to influence an action before maybe it would have otherwise taken place. And in the context of Funraise, we have a machine learning module on our giving platform that basically changes the ask string, so that when a donor comes to your site and sees the amounts that they're going to give, we actually change that on the fly based on a model that we've built to learn about the types of users, the devices, the time of day, the zip codes, all these things that actually would help personalize the appropriate ask to the donor landing on your page. And as a result, we've seen a 50% conversion on the giving form. On the data side, I think that AI plays an incredible role in helping you just synthesize and understand the data in a more effective and efficient manner. And some of the things that we've seen our customers adopt and it's gone quite well is a few different areas where we've implemented AI within our what we call fundraising intelligence tool. One of those is just data explanations, right? You've got this large amount of data, and how do you understand the anomalies in the data? How do you understand, why things are going up or down, or what's influencing all of this, large amounts of data? And so with our AI insights, it basically points out, here are the things you really need to understand about this specific report or chart that you're looking at.
Context, yeah.
Exactly, context. The other thing is, I think a lot of organizations just struggle with being able to create the right type of reports, or have a lack of understanding of the syntax of how these more robust reporting tools are built. And so we've introduced a natural language model that helps organizations be able to create cross-object reports very efficiently with natural language. And this has played a tremendous role in helping organizations understand things like churn risk, things like growth opportunities. I think, Michael, or Matt, sorry, to your point about turning insights into action, this is where that comes in for sure. And so I think that to kind of sum that all up is, as we look at machine learning, as we look at AI and the role that it plays in our own fundraising, there's a lot of different applications. Some is just noise and really won't move the needle that much for you, but others has real impact. And the way that we think about that at Funraise is, how can we convert more people to give, and how can we help you better understand the data using machine learning and AI?
Well, and you touched on something really interesting around the use of like the ask string, and in a digital format, you can kind of do this like dynamic content in real time too, but those applications do cross over into direct mail. And I think that's one of the most incredible ways that we can use this information is to God, like move our customization and that dynamic flow into more and more nuances, more and more specifics to so we're not just sending the same mailer to this large group where, we're able to segment it into deeper, more nuanced folks, that might respond to different ask strings, that might respond to different checkboxes or formats and things like that. And with the scalability and the speed of this technology behind the scenes, it's just incredible how fine-tuned you can start to make your marketing pieces. So
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off that, if that's
mhm,
okay. Seth Godin actually talks about this in his book called Purple Cow, and specifically around the law of large numbers. And I
mm,
think what a lot of organizations tend to do is look at sort of their market and be like, wow, there's 300 million people that live in the United States. That's a huge market to raise funds from. But that's if that is the approach that you take, it's probably going to yield very negative results.
mhm,
Whereas, yes, there's a big market, but how do we actually hyper personalize in large markets to
yeah,
focus on like our key donors, our key demographics? And I think that's where AI comes in to really help segment who you should be targeting, who you should be going after in terms of new donors and so forth. And so I think like this hyper personalization at scale is what AI allows
mhm,
many organizations to be able to achieve.
yes. Thumbs
Agreed.
up emoji. Perfectly said.
Yep.
Well
Good
said.
job.
Very well said. All right. So, Matt, we're going to start with you this time. I want to know, when you hear others in our space in this nonprofit industry talking about using AI and machine learning, like what kind of roadblocks do you hear that keep coming up, that keep getting mentioned? And like, what are some of the solutions to get over that hurdle?
Yeah, I think I'd say one of the primary roadblocks when it comes to harnessing the power of AI that's impacting folks in any industry, really. I don't know that it's specific to fundraising, is that not enough value is placed on HI, right? The human intelligence component of this. Um, so having access to the bleeding edge tools and technology, it's one thing, but having that team of experts that have the experience and the know-how to unlock all that potential is another. So we were fortunate enough to have embraced AI, ML, and now deep learning
Mhm.
techniques early on. But equally, if not more important, was finding that team of folks that had a good understanding of that, had a good understanding of fundraising, and were able to kind of marry the technology with the application. There's a science, it's a science and an art, right? And it's kind of the perfect balance of those two things that I think leads to the greatest gains.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because this is a very sciencey kind of conversation, but there's still so much art and finesse that has to happen to really find that balance and like the true success of the integration. So Justin, on that topic, I want to hop over to you too. So I'm curious to know, like, what do you see and hear in your conversations? I mean, especially working in the podcasting world, this is kind of this information, these conversations are kind of coming at you all the time. So like, what are the roadblocks to AI and tech stack that you're hearing?
Yeah, I think the biggest roadblock that I see comes down to, and it's right in line with what Matt is saying, is like the technology in and of itself is not going to transform your organization if you don't have the right people and processes in place
Mhm.
to actually utilize the technology. And a lot of times, people are looking for a silver bullet solution to fix a problem that they might have, whether that's they need to raise more funds or they need to understand their data better. And buying technology for those two things in and of itself is not going to solve your problems if you don't have the right people and the right processes in place. And so that's to me is where I see the biggest obstacle
Mm.
is, and also the biggest opportunity to really leverage up on the impact AI can have for your organizations. If you can get the people and process right, you're going to see a huge leapfrog in terms of the advancements you can make with things like AI and machine learning and so forth. And so that's where I would really focus on solve the problems to solve internally at your organization is the people and process plays, and then layer on the technology, which should be able to help give you pretty big wins when you have that in order.
Good point and good segue, because I'd really love to hear Michael's take on like what are some of the solutions that almost like step one, like what do you do to kind of tackle this problem like as soon as we get off the webinar? Where do we start?
So before I do that,
Yeah.
I want to drill in more on the roadblocks, right?
Okay.
Data is one of the main roadblocks. I read a poll recently about the expectations versus the reality of AI in the workplace, and majority of people using generative AI tools, for example, say it's actually decreasing their productivity and enhancing their workloads as opposed to reducing it. This is due predominantly to data issues. A high level of data quality, accuracy, completeness, timeliness, consistency are required to unlock the benefits of ML or AI. And secondarily, ML competency is something that's developed over time, right? Without a hands-on coach, there's no shortcut to gaining the capability. There's value to having been a pioneer in ML and fundraising, right? We've been tuning the dials and updating our best practices documents across hundreds of charities, thousands of campaigns, billions of communications, and it allows you to eliminate a lot of those roadblocks, right? Justin mentioned anomalies in the data. There are a lot of anomalies and there's a lot of misleading information inside these charity CRMs, lack of standardization for one, and that creates a lot of misdirection of bias, right? Ultimately, change is hard, and jumping into ML or AI with the expectation of having it solve problems without changing the way you think about data internally and externally is impractical, right? If I gave you a rocket and said, hey, now you can go to Mars, good luck, not so fast, right? You need fuel, you need mission control, you need pilots, you need navigators. Once you get to Mars and say, hey, I don't like it there, how do I get back? ML fundraising is no different, right? So what can people do now? Step one, start thinking about data as the fuel for your mission, across channels, across the echelons of the giving pyramid. Start aggregating and standardizing. Standardizing is such an important word and people misinterpret that, but the way you code everything, the sources of data need to be consistent. Start capturing more granular information, the details of the marketing communications themselves, the weight of the paper, the font, the size of the font, the package details, the ask array, everything, the graphics, right? Think holistically about how to work together using ML to drive revenue up the entirety of the organization. We work with so many groups where they fight for attribution. They're not thinking about how do I, as fast as possible, move people from that mass audience at the bottom of the pyramid up to mid-level, to major giving, to planned giving. And the reality is the largest dollars for charities are sitting at the top of that pyramid, but there's not a lot of integration. The most sophisticated groups are just now getting to the point where they're thinking about that the right way. Everything is basically disconnected, disjointed, non-standardized. And even if you think it's standardized, if you actually do the analysis, it's not. So thinking about that, and starting to act on consolidating and standardizing the way you do everything it's the heaviest lift of every engagement that we have. Getting all of the data so that we can help focus on getting everything standardized in a way that the engines can consume it to help guide better decisioning. That's step one.
That's a big step one, but I think it aligns a lot with what both Matt and Justin were saying in like aligning the processes. So getting that internal structure down. So starting to collect the data, like you were saying, like the paperweight, the font, like starting to ingrain that in your campaign process, and and the recording of what you're doing in your campaign is a really good step one to start influencing the future of the campaign. So it's a lot, but I think it all kind of comes down to putting processes in place and getting the more detailed information into your regular routine of campaign monitoring.
Mhm.
So very good. Okay. Justin, I'm going to start with you for this question. So, from your experience in the tech and nonprofit space, so how is AI helping us to identify potential donors more effectively than maybe traditional methods?
So I think where AI helps is being able to quickly process a ton of data, often more data than you often store in your CRM, or at least layering on data that you purchase, and so forth, and being able to process that data to understand, just because someone has the propensity to give $100,000, are they actually going to give $100,000 to your organization?
Right.
There's a lot of other variables that you need to understand. What other types of charities are they giving to? What do they care? What do they care about as an individual? And so, understanding all of these different layers are extremely important in identifying if that donor, who has the potential to be a major donor for your organization, is actually a candidate to be a major donor. For instance. I also think, going back to Michael's point on sort of this donor pyramid, going to the bottom of the pyramid, there's a ton of opportunity to actually create recurring revenue from this donor base. And a lot of organizations will tend to ask for a one-time gift. We have technology in place that will now automatically ask the donor, instead of if they're making a gift under a certain amount, we can increase the lifetime value of that gift by 50, 60% if they sign up to give monthly, and utilizing technology to be able to automate those types of asks when the time is right, when it's the right type of donor, can play a big part in helping create a strong recurring donor program, for instance, which has lots of other amazing benefits for the organization. But those are a couple, examples that I would lean into as I think about how AI can help identify, potential donors, potential donors.
Yeah, great. And I love how you tie that into influencing future programs too, because once we identify them, we need to keep on nurturing that relationship and keep them involved and engaged. So spot on with that comment. So Michael, over to you for your thoughts on this. So identifying new prospects is kind of something VeraData does very, very well. So what are some of the top ways that these advancements in AI, machine learning, and even over the history of the company, that have helped us call out new donors, maybe new segments for the organizations that we work with? You're mute. Michael, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I'll go back to something I said a couple of moments ago, right? That highly granular data that we started capturing and thinking about 2 decades ago, is helping guide messaging, the creative, the package preferences, the way we use the different channels, the way we sequence the channels from timing and cadence, down to like the font sizes and what to use on the outer envelope. Everything is mathematically formulated, and it can be used to improve and expand the reach of the nonprofit. Changing the way that we think about package testing, for example. Traditionally, if a package, if a test package achieved a $50 cost to acquire and the control package generated the $25 cost to acquire, that test is considered to be a failure. But AI, complete data, that perspective is upended, right? AI can look at this infinitely complex data. It can identify the subset of the audience for whom that test package would yield a $19 cost to acquire, for example. So further, we can identify a whole new audience that will be receptive to that new package. I'll give you a recent example where we ID'd a segment of over 2 million donors, where the test package that would have been otherwise considered a failure will perform better than the existing control. Without all of that underlying data, and without AI's ability to look at all of it, and consume it all, it's impossible. So it's an example of how AI is expanding that footprint of philanthropy. It's physically increasing the size of the donor audience by interpreting information differently, giving you a view, giving you a lens. It's like you discovered the microscope. Wow, I looked at this and I didn't see all of that. Now I can see it all.
Yeah, and I mean, what an interesting discovery to find where a list where if it had just been under human eyes, we kind of would have scooted it along. But the technology, the algorithms were kind of like, hold on, there's something here. There's something for us to keep pursuing. That's just such a fascinating process to me. And a really good segue over to Matt, because we have this incredible data science team. So what innovations have they been able to discover and use for the nonprofit space?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, Michael and I were fortunate enough to kind of have gone all in on all things AI and ML 17 years ago when we started the company. And of equal importance is the team that we have that manages all of those solutions. So having this group of folks with they have multiple PhDs in applied mathematics and neurosciences, really smart folks doing nothing but building models and solutions for nonprofits, I think has really led to our ability to provide the breakthrough results for our clients that we've historically been able to do. The innovations that excite me most kind of lend themselves to the things that everybody's been talking about up until this point, specifically some of the things Michael has mentioned about deeper segmentation and understanding result and kind of getting away from that you're either in or you're out, or the test worked or it didn't, it kind of mentality and thinking, and that the solutions don't need to be a one size fits all, type of approach. And our team is heavily focused on kind of pushing the boundaries of not only the tools and techniques that we use. I mentioned briefly earlier, we're exploring now how can we use deep learning methodologies which enable us to ingest not only the kind of structured input, traditional input data, but also unstructured data, and how can we have the machine help find trends without the need to have a lot of kind of human intervention in terms of those feature selections. But I think really our evolution will be towards what's called prescriptive analytics. And if you Google what are the different types of analytics that exist, typically you see the result is there are four, really quickly and simply stated. The first is descriptive analytics, which again, simply stated is tell me about what happened. Then you have diagnostic analytics, which is tell me why something happened. And then you have predictive analytics, which is where most folks kind of play today, right? It's feeding information and having the system make a prediction about something that will happen. And that's not a new technique. That's been employed since the 70s. I think Reader's Digest even was maybe the first kind of direct marketing company to employ predictive analytics, multiple linear regression analysis to direct marketing. But it's typically focused on the who. Tell me who is most likely to do the thing, whatever that thing might be. But in my view, kind of the holy grail of analytics is that next type, which is prescriptive analytics, which is really defined simply as tell me all the things I need to do to get the best outcome. So beyond just who, but what, when, how often, through what channel, right? So that's really our team is focused on. How can I take all of that traditionally unstructured data, make sense of it, and provide that decision support to our clients so they understand not only who they should communicate with, but when and how. And it doesn't need to be this single solution. That prescription can be multifaceted, so that it resonates with a wide audience, and we're delivering something that's hyper targeted, hyper relevant, and hyper responsive.
Yeah, I like the phrase that you just said, which was decision support. And because we use we use the phrase, like data driven a lot, especially when we're talking about things like this. But when you can have data driven decision support around the creative aspects too, and the timing, and kind of the elements that we typically A/B test, iteration after iteration, but we can kind of arm the campaign with that information out of the gate, is just such a powerful way to lead a campaign, right? Like, it's just such a really strong way to, not just like invest the money into this campaign, but really invest it in a smart way where you're kind of ahead of the curve and ahead of the testing, because it's already been done and the information's already there. So we're starting off just, I think, so much stronger than we've been capable of doing in the past. So really, really cool innovations coming down with prescriptive analytics, I think. Okay, so outside of pinpointing new prospects and segmenting existing donors, we've kind of talked about that a lot. Like, what role is AI playing in in the optimization process, and what metrics should we be looking at to measure modern success? So I'm going to start with Michael on this one.
So I think too often in this space, there is a single metric used for some of the most important decisions that have long-term impacts on groups, or siloed metrics, right? In many cases. So we see acquisitions where people spend most of their money, and cost to acquire is the most common baseline for acquisition success. But AI, again, when fueled with tons of data, tells us that that's not the right way to look at it. Combining metrics like long-term value, giving propensity that Justin just talked about, which is spot on, by the way, peer-to-peer influencer scores. It gives us the ability to grow donor files faster, right? To open up larger universes of those potential donors, and often to create alignment within the charities. So I think too often you see self-imposed barriers to growth that the new best practices are breaking down, and it's creating a pretty massive opportunity for philanthropy as a whole, right? Yeah, I'll give you an example. Often you see acquisition mailing performance. We get it all the time. It gets sorted by CTA as the benchmark, cost to acquire. But when you overlay 6-month, 12-month, 24-month LTV, look at the intersection of capacity and propensity, and the proportion of donors that are most likely to move into mid-level or major giving buckets that we frequently discover is sitting in the mid-level of those CTAs, those are the ones that are producing the best long-term value. So we want to guide fundraisers to look more holistically, and I think empower them with the decisioning capability to hone the focus toward the long-term health of the charity. From the point of acquisition, back to Justin's point, we can identify who fits into which giving bucket, right? We can code those individuals with capacity and propensity, and that empowers the charities to start speaking to that donor who maybe only gives $50 differently from the very beginning, right? It allows you to skip steps, to move faster, to generate bigger donations. Without AI or ML, it's a massive sea of information. There's just no way, right? The data is simply is too vast to interpret. So it's a transformational leap forward once you get your hands around it and start implementing it.
Yeah, I like the point that you bring up too about like these self-imposed metrics, because some of them, the single point KPI is something that's so ingrained in this process that we might not even know we're like self-imposing like these restrictions anymore. Like, we might not even, like, because they've been such a foundational element, like we can't even like expand our minds to like think in different ways up until this point. So I think that's why these conversations are so important, because it just kind of opens up that blockage that it's not a bad thing. It's just how it's always been done. That's happened in our brains or in our processes. So I think that's a really interesting point. Matt, would you add anything to that?
Maybe just a little bit, and then not so much as it relates to fundraising success specifically, or that kind of single metric, but as I think about success, right, and how I can deliver and support success for our clients, for me, my mind typically goes to how can I help the organization deliver an exceptional donor experience, right? And
Mhm.
can organizations think about the experience that the donor has, right? We hear conversations talk about the donor pyramid or what's the donor journey. And, Justin, I think touched on it a little bit earlier about this kind of still siloed thinking about what channel the donors communicated through. But really, and it somewhat relates to this kind of prescriptive analytics, and that we want to help support organizations do all the things they need to do in order to create those lasting relationships. At the end of the day, for me, that's what these organizations are in business to do, right? Yes, they have
Mhm.
to support their mission, support their programs, but as it relates to um, fundraising and marketing, right? It's delivering on that exceptional experience. And those organizations that harness tools, AI and ML included, that facilitate the delivery of that exceptional experience, I think are those that are going to be most successful, those that are going to be most differentiated from their quote unquote competitors. So again, just as I think about success, that's typically kind of the viewpoint I kind of come at it from.
I love that. Like that, that's much a great new like fresh perspective on other ways to look at success outside of what we're usually measuring. So I think that's a wonderful perspective. And then yeah, Justin, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on success.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's a couple different ways to answer this question, and so maybe I'll share two examples. But one is what I've seen is most organizations categorize their donors based on their past, not their future activity. Michael, you were definitely mentioning this as you were sharing. But as an example, you see a lot of organizations kind of have like three major buckets, right? Like recurring giving, annual funds, major gifts, right? And donors land in those buckets based off of what they gave last year, what they gave over the last 24 months, whatever it might be. But this like that approach, I think, is just fundamentally wrong because it will cause you to interact with donors in the wrong way. And as a very practical example of that, I'm going to share about a failure which then led to success. Is when I was running an organization called Liberty in North Korea, we did that is exactly how we operated. And we had this donor that was giving $20 a month for 3.5 years. And we decided to bring in some more data into our database to just get a better understanding of our donor demographic and their capacity and propensity and so forth. And we found that this particular donor giving $20 actually had way higher capacity and much stronger propensity. And so we're like, this $20 donor deserves us to fly out to the middle of America and have a conversation to see can we get them excited about what we're doing. And in doing so, this donor went from $20 a month or $224 a year to $100,000 a year in giving because we were able to personalize the way that we outreach to them, the way that we talk to this individual. And so all that to say is if we understand what the capacity of our donor demographic is and categorize them based on that or code them based on that, and not to sound too trite, that just helps deliver a much stronger donor experience. I think also the thing that we need to get better at is looking not at a 12-month or trailing 24-month time period. We need to look at forecasted projected lifetime value of a donor and the channels that they're coming from, because we can fall into traps thinking that this channel is the cost of acquisition is lower and there's more number of donors coming from this channel, but the churn of that channel is significantly higher, bringing down the lifetime value to a much lower value for the organization. And so I think understanding what are the channels that drive long-term value for your
Mm.
organization. In the short term, it may be less dollars and it may be more expensive, but it will actually lead to better results for your organization. And so looking more at those like leading indicators, that leading potential versus again, what's happened in the last 12 or 24 months.
Excellent. Great point. Yeah. Yeah. That the value, because we see such, when you invest in a nonprofit, it isn't a one-time purchase. So, you want this investment in something you believe in, something that you want to contribute to and do good with. And so that is something you look at long term as a person contributing to the nonprofit, right? And so I think looking at those value points, looking at those key characteristics, and having the bigger picture in mind when you're reporting, when you're reporting back, when you're analyzing the information is so key to the future planning of the rest of your strategies or things you might do in the future. So really, really great point. Okay, for our last question, we are going to do a quick lightning round. And Matt, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll wrap things up and let everyone go on with their day. So Matt, what future trends do you foresee with the use of AI in the nonprofit industry? What should organizations kind of prepare for now?
Yeah, I think probably my answer touched on in other answers. I'd say the future trends is predominantly the adoption and use of AI and ML. I think as it relates to what my team and I are doing and where I see ultimately the industry going is to leverage analytic techniques like prescriptive analytics or methodologies like deep learning and use of neural nets. But beyond that, I think the way organizations can get prepared to leverage all of this capacity and technology is to, as I mentioned before, invest in your infrastructure, invest in your data tools, that repository, invest in the people that can help manage them and safeguard them, right? I think most organizations would agree that data set is their most valuable asset.
Mm-hmm.
And placing an increased importance on how I can maximize and optimize that asset should be part of a regular conversation for most organizations. And thinking about, how can I enrich or augment that data set? If you were to talk to any of our data scientists, which I do, challenging them frequently, how can we get a better result for our clients is a question I routinely ask. And the answer in most cases is more data, right? More data equals a better result. So I think as we've all touched on here, be thinking about what other data points can I bring in? How can I standardize data? How can I be thinking more holistically about the information I am capturing that then can ultimately be leveraged and used in all of these various analytic solutions?
All right. And Justin, your lightning round answer, what do you foresee coming in the future?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I hope I foresee, or what I hope happens. Nonprofits have what I would say the biggest problem that nonprofits face today is donor retention. The national average is above 50%, which means organizations are having to replace 50% of their revenue every year, which is if you compare that to software companies or technology companies, that would be basically that company would be dead if they were losing that much revenue every year. And so where I think AI has a great opportunity to impact is how organizations retain their donors. And it's going to come through, we were talking about earlier, through bringing insights to the front and center and providing actions immediately that can be taken to prevent a donor from falling off or being forgotten and so forth. And so for me, the most useful and practical application of AI and ML would be to how do we solve this horrible problem in the nonprofit space that is causing 50% of revenue to churn each year. If we can solve that problem for organizations, I think we will see larger organizations, much more impact being achieved because more revenue, which obviously has a direct correlation to impact.
Reliable revenue too. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
Agreed.
And Michael, close us out. Your lightning round answer.
Yeah, lightning round action. Matt said it, Justin said it, I've said it. And I know there's some data people on this call, right? Everything starts with data. To make your dreams come true, you need to connect the dots with the data. So investing in data competencies is money and effort well spent. I think AI with a little human assistance will inevitably guide all of the decisions that all of us on this call, are making today to create these data-driven omni-channel fundraising campaigns. At some point, I predict it's going to power the 1.5 million charities who wish they could raise more money, but don't have access to the data or technology, right? Currently, the costs and availability means these solutions are out of reach for the vast majority of charities, but we, both the collective we, those on this call, newcomers to the industry, moving fast to close the gap. Internally, we are rapidly advancing, and Matt is leading this effort at building the self-service ecosystem that will give everyone access to the things that they need to advance the missions. I think someday the goal is to democratize the entire end-to-end solution to achieve our personal aspirational prediction, where we're increasing in philanthropic giving in the United States as a component of GDP, which means reversing the recent trends in individual giving. So crystal ball prediction is AI is going to deliver that in game.
I love it. All right. So to close out, thank you guys so much for being here. Justin, if people want to find out more about you or Funraise, where can they go? What should they do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a couple of ways to find us. You can obviously visit our website, which is funraise.org. That's no D. It's fun as in F-U-N. Also, I'm on LinkedIn. I write a lot of content on LinkedIn, and so would love to connect with anyone interested on LinkedIn. You can find me just Justin Wheeler on LinkedIn.
And I posted all of our LinkedIn links to Funraise, to you, to Matt, to Michael, and to VeraData. So Matt, Michael, anything you want to share about VeraData before we close out today?
Get more information. So yeah, you call Matt, visit our site, send us an email, give us a call, whatever's easiest. We'd love to speak with you. We'd be happy to get more specific information about anything that's relevant to you in your hands. We have a lot of collateral. We have a lot of information that we like to share to help start. We talked about the things you got to do to help move that ball. Maddie, anything you would add to that?
I think you got it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Diana. Appreciate everyone's time today. Hopefully this was useful.
Yeah, and keep an eye on your inbox, because you're going to get a recording of this webinar. You'll also get a copy of, Michael just said we have a lot of content that we like to share. We just published a huge white paper called The Nonprofit's Guide to Donor Science. You get a copy of that. You're also going to get a fun extra bonus from Funraise about Giving Tuesday. So lots of really good fun goodies coming to your inbox by the end of the day today, Texas time. Thank you guys so much for being here. We are absolutely going to be doing more of these webinars, so stay tuned and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.